Every disappearance has its hinge point, a moment small, almost unnoticeable, when decisions are made in shadows, and life shifts forever. For Malehya, that moment didn't unfold in a courtroom or through a clash of voices. It emerged in the stillness between hushed conversations, the instant she decided there was no one left to believe in. Some say she fled out of recklessness. Others argue it was pure desperation. But perhaps the truth is more unsettling. Malehya didn't vanish out of fear. She disappeared with intent. We may never know the exact second she resolved to take her children and slip from sight, but we know the pressures closing in. The tense meetings with Child Protective Services, the wary glances from neighbors, the letters that remained unsent, the phone calls that suddenly stopped, the warnings she dropped in passing, cryptic remarks dismissed by those who failed to hear the weight beneath them. Tonight, we follow her trail through those final weeks. We unravel the tension, the overlooked signals, and the haunting possibility that for Malehya, vanishing wasn't surrender. It was strategy, because if you look closely, this isn't only the story of a mother who disappeared. It may be the story of someone convinced she was protecting her children, or making certain they would never be found. Before we dive into today's story, kindly subscribe to our Shadow Detective channel if you believe in fighting for justice. Kindly help us reach 100 subscribers, and we believe that with energy and support, we will achieve it. Let's build this community that refuses to stay silent, to stop asking the hardest question of all, but why? Every view, every comment, and every subscriber is a stand against silence, and a step toward truth for those who can't fight for themselves. She didn't slip into the night without purpose. Malehya Brooks Murray, to outsiders, she was a puzzle hard to read, harder to understand. But to Lily and Jack, she was simply Mom, the one who shielded them through years of hardship, who kept the world at a cautious distance, and who, whether out of fear or foresight, never placed full trust in those around her. Lily, just 6 years old. Jack, only 4. 2 children remembered for their bright eyes and restless energy. Children who, by every account, adored their mother, even as the world around them grew heavier and more uncertain. Before we proceed, please hold on for a moment. Shadow Detective is not here to waste another moment. He's here for one reason: justice. The focus is, and will always be, the children. Every step, every question, every piece of evidence is about uncovering the truth and bringing it into the light. Remember, every word in this space, even if you've heard it before, has a purpose. Every detail is being examined, because hidden among these facts could be the key we've been searching for. In the months leading up to their disappearance, Malehya's world was quietly contracting. Social worker visits became more frequent, questions from friends more difficult to evade. Rumors floated in hushed tones, each one striking like a small, unseen blow. Calls to certain family members stopped completely. Public appearances became rare, almost non-existent. Some say the pressure was mounting, inching her closer to a point of no return. Others believe she was already orchestrating her exit, testing limits, preparing the children for a reality they wouldn't understand for years. Today, we trace that pressure, from the first fractures in her social circle, to the moment everything finally gave way. If Malehya disappeared with her children, it wasn't a snap decision. It was the culmination of months of fear, isolation, and a breaking point she could no longer ignore. Inside the modest home she shared with Daniel Martel, life was anything but calm. What began as quiet disagreements escalated into arguments sharp enough to slice through thin walls, loud enough for neighbors to pause, to listen, to remember. Some nights, the shouting came in waves, followed by stretches of silence, broken only by a slammed door or hurried footsteps across the floor. A few neighbors would later recall seeing Lily and Jack on the front steps during those moments, tiny figures in the fading light, waiting for the storm inside to subside. Daniel's presence seemed to grow heavier with each passing month. What started as occasional tension became a constant shadow. Malehya's once bright voice grew quieter, her smile more guarded. She began drawing the curtains even in daylight, shutting the world out from view. And then came the locks, not just the front door. Bedroom doors, the back gate, a latch on the kitchen window. Friends noticed she stopped answering calls from certain people, especially those who asked too many questions. Playdates for the kids became rare. Visitors were greeted at the door, but rarely invited inside. It was as if she was building a fortress, not just to keep something out, but to keep the truth in. This wasn't simply a troubled household. It was a pressure cooker, and the heat was rising. In the days leading up to their disappearance, the tension in that house reached a breaking point. There were reports, quiet, second-hand whispers, of one argument that lasted for hours. Voices raised, things breaking, a child crying. A neighbor claimed she saw Malehya standing outside afterward, her hands trembling as she lit a cigarette, staring at the ground as if trying to find answers in the cracks of the pavement. That week, Daniel's temper seemed sharper, his patience thinner. He was said to be making new demands about where Malehya could go, who she could speak to. Even the children weren't spared from the oppressive atmosphere. Jack became withdrawn, Lily clung closer to her mother. But perhaps the most telling sign was Malehya's behavior in those last 48 hours. She withdrew entirely. No school drop-offs, no visits to the corner store, no calls returned. For those who tried to reach her, the phone would ring and ring, then stop. A close friend would later claim that during their last conversation, Malehya's voice was low, shaky, and certain. She said one thing that still haunts her. "If I don't leave now, we won't survive this." Whatever happened next wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, planned, the quiet end to months of private fear, and the start of a mystery that still hasn't been solved. In the months before she vanished, Malehya's life appeared to shrink, but not in the chaotic way that comes from bad luck or disorganization. It was deliberate, measured, almost as if every move had been rehearsed in her mind long before it happened. The first sign came quietly. Without notice, she pulled Lily and Jack out of their after-school programs. To the staff she smiled, saying she just needed to rearrange her schedule. No explanation, no future date for their return. From that day on, the children's movements became limited. School, home, and nowhere else. The playdates stopped. The familiar sight of them walking home with other children vanished. Around the same time, small amounts of money began disappearing from her bank account. Not hundreds at once, that would be too noticeable. Instead, it was little withdrawals, 40 here, 60 there, always in cash, always from different ATMs across town. On paper, it looked harmless, but over weeks, the total quietly grew into something significant. Money that could fit in an envelope, tucked into a bag, ready for travel without a digital trace. Then her phone habits changed. Friends began to notice she was harder to reach. Sometimes calls rang unanswered for hours. Messages would sit as delivered, but never read. It wasn't just avoidance, it was detachment. Later, investigators would learn she had disposed of her main phone entirely. No carrier records, no data trail. In its place, she carried a second-hand device bought in cash from a man who sold electronics out of the trunk of his car. No contract, no ID required. Piece by piece, she was erasing her digital footprint. The old life, the one people could follow, question and control, was being dismantled. At the time, no one saw the full picture. To friends it was stress. To neighbors, maybe a rough patch in her relationship. But with hindsight, it's clear Malehya wasn't spiraling. She was preparing. And every small, careful step brought her closer to the day she would take her children and vanish into the unknown. For months, Malehya's retreat from the world had been gradual, like a shadow lengthening at dusk. But every shadow has its breaking point. The moment when the last bit of light disappears. That moment came on a cold, wind-stung night in late March. The details remain murky, but according to one neighbor, raised voices were heard inside her home, not the muffled sound of an argument, but sharp, clipped words that carried through the walls. A man's voice, then a door slammed so hard the sound seemed to crack the stillness of the street. Hours later, a clerk at a 24-hour gas station, just off Highway 11, would remember a woman pulling in alone. The security camera showed her, head down, hair disheveled, hands trembling as she tried to unscrew a bottle of water. The clerk says she was crying. Not loud, not hysterical, but the kind of silent, shaking tears that come from something you can't easily explain. When he asked if she was okay, she didn't answer. She just paid for gas, slid a crumpled bill across the counter, and drove away into the dark. In the days that followed, the change was visible to those paying close attention. Lily and Jack were seen at a local supermarket with their mother. But they weren't the smiling, chatty kids the community was used to. They stayed close to her side, glancing at each other in a way that seemed unspoken, like they both knew something they couldn't share. In the days that followed, fragments of her private world began to emerge. Among her belongings were scraps of notebook paper, with hurried, unfinished sentences. "Don't answer the door if... We have to be careful at the bridge. He's been here again." Investigators also found messages on her phone that hinted at paranoia, or perhaps proof that someone really was watching her. One text to an unlisted number read, "You saw him again, didn't you?" There was no reply. Another simply said, "We can't stay here. Not safe." Neighbors would later recall little things. Malehya pulling her curtains shut, earlier and earlier each day. The children no longer riding their bikes past the corner store. A morning when she walked to the community mailbox, saw the door slightly ajar, and turned around without touching it. One resident swore she muttered something about it being messed with before leaving. These were not the actions of a woman living without fear. These were the behaviors of someone who believed every movement was being observed, every decision monitored. And when a person truly believes they're being watched, every trip to the store feels like a mission. Every neighbor could be an informant, and every moment with your children could be the last safe one you have. By the time Malia made her choice, the walls around her weren't just metaphorical, they were real. Locked doors, drawn curtains, a phone that rang less and less, because she'd stopped answering. But beneath the stillness was movement. Quiet, deliberate movement. She began studying maps, not the kind you'd spread out on a table, but routes etched into her mind. The less traveled county roads, the logging tracks that connected back to main highways, if you knew where to turn. Paths she'd once taken on family drives, now reconsidered as escape routes. She knew the dangers of being spotted. So the plan, if you could call it that, involved avoiding the obvious. No brightly lit gas stations. No rest stops with cameras in every corner. No toll roads where license plates are automatically scanned. Every mile would need to be invisible. Friends recall she asked strange, guarded questions. Which back roads don't get salted in winter? Does that gas station near the river have cameras outside or just inside? She was collecting pieces of a puzzle no one else knew existed. But perhaps the bigger question isn't how she planned to go. It's why she never sought help from the very institutions built to protect families. Her distrust was bone deep. In her mind, CPS didn't save children. They relocated them, often back into the environments that caused harm in the first place. Law enforcement, she believed their reports got filed away until it was too late. And the thought of an official intervention didn't bring comfort. It brought terror. She was convinced that once those systems stepped in, her children would no longer be hers to protect. She didn't trust that anyone else could see the danger she saw. So instead of paperwork, there would be preparation. Instead of knocking on an office door, there would be silent packing in the middle of the night. The plan was fragile, desperate, and irreversible. To an outsider, it would soon look like an abduction. To Malia, it was something else entirely, a rescue mission. In the weeks that followed, the search fanned out like a widening ripple in dark water. But the thing about ripples, they fade. Investigators, journalists, and online sleuths began building their own maps, not of where Malia was last seen, but of where she could disappear to. Some pointed to remote relatives, family members who lived far from the public eye, people who owed Malia favors, or shared her mistrust of outside authority. A cousin in the northern woods who didn't use a smartphone. An aunt with a cabin so deep in the pines that even cell signals died before reaching the driveway. Others believed she had slipped into the embrace of off-grid communities. Clusters of people who traded connection for isolation, where a new face could blend in so long as they pulled their weight and asked no questions. There were whispers of a desert encampment, a cluster of RVs parked miles from the nearest paved road, where outsiders never lingered. Another theory, the calculated creation of a fake identity. All it takes is one birth certificate bought under the table, a driver's license renewed in a name that isn't yours. With cash, determination, and the right contacts, she could become someone else entirely. A new name on the lease of a small apartment in a town that doesn't check backgrounds too closely. If she's out there, Malehya walking with Lily and Jack at her side, she is living inside 1,000 small fears. Every knock at the door is a possible ending. Every face in a crowd could be the one who recognizes her. Every sudden siren could be the sound of the world closing in. That is what disappearance does to a person. It gives them the thing they wanted most, distance, and takes from them the thing they will never get back. A life lived openly, without the ache of hiding. But there's another side to that silence. For those who loved Lily and Jack, long before their faces covered mailboxes and telephone poles, the not knowing is a quiet, gnawing grief. It sharpens with time. It finds its way into every dinner table conversation, every vigil, every news report, always whispering the same question: why did she leave? Was it an act of rescue? A frantic, heartbreaking attempt by a mother to pull her children away from harm she believed authorities could not see? Or was it something darker? A disappearance that doubles as a cover, a way to bury a truth so ugly it could never survive a courtroom. Both answers live in the same neighborhood of possibility. Both can be true to someone's memory. Both demand we treat what follows with care and urgency. If she is innocent, if she fled because the system failed her, then the only path to justice is for her to come forward, to tell the story in full, to let investigators test the facts, to let the people who love Lily and Jack find them and heal in whatever way they can. If she is guilty, and that is a truth only a careful investigation can determine, then the only path to justice is the same truth: evidence, accountability. The law is not merely a punishment. It is a way for communities to know what happened, for families to place blame where it belongs, and for children's names not to be swallowed by rumor. We have spent 30 minutes tracing the tracks she left. Deliberate choices, small cash withdrawals, a second-hand phone, a route designed to vanish. We have listened to neighbors, to friends, to the quiet scraps of paper that kept a terrified voice alive long enough to be read. We have done this not to convict a woman in public, but to hold up the hard, messy questions, until someone gives us the answers we deserve. And if you are the one carrying the knowledge that could end this uncertainty, if you are the person who knows where Malehya and the children are, or who knows what happened that night, listen closely. Coming forward does not erase the past, but it can stop the silence from writing the rest of the story. Was it survival, or something darker?